Hello animators, we're gonna do a walkthrough on a bouncing ball assignment in Maya. So first of all, make sure that you have this Ultimate Ball version 1.01 downloaded and just drag it onto your desktop. You can find it on the CMCO server under the rigs folder and the simple subfolder. Once you have that, go ahead and just create a new folder. It's always kind of a good practice because you'll be turning in this folder. Do your last name, then your first name, and hit enter. Just set that aside for now, and then go ahead and launch Maya. And we're going to set up a project folder. What project folders do is they help keep your workflow streamlined. Everything's going to be organized. You won't ever lose your textures or your characters and whatnot. So once you have Maya open and your spinny loading circles are all finished there, go ahead and go to File, Project window here, and you're going to click on that. It's going to bring up the project window. You'll click New, and for this assignment we'll call it Bouncing Ball, just like I typed. And then you'll navigate to your folder that you made, so your last name, first name. So just open that up and then hit select and then hit accept. And as I mentioned, what that'll do is it'll create a folder for you. It's very nifty that you don't have to worry about where things are located. So we'll go ahead and open that up and see what it looks like. So if you go back to your desktop, open up your named folder here, you'll see that there's a bouncing ball folder. You open up that folder and you've got your organization here. So there's assets, autosave, cache, clips, etc., etc. There's only so many in here that are really important. It's fine to just let Maya create the defaults, even if we don't use a lot of them, just for the sake of not having to mess around with too many settings. So one of the primary folders you'll be using is this scenes folder. This is where Maya will save your scenes by default, and it is where it'll look for your rigs. So let's go ahead and drag your ultimate ball into the scenes folder. Also some other ones to note, and we'll go over them in class as we kind of use them. Source images is where your textures will go. Sound is where any sound clips you make will go. Movies, that's where I'm pretty sure where if you create a Playblast, which we'll talk about momentarily, that'll get saved there. Images, I think, is if you actually render out your video, it'll render it, every single frame as an image, and it'll get saved there. So let's go ahead and minimize that, and we'll go back to Maya. Now here's something to keep in mind. Let's say you've got your folder right here, and you take it with you everywhere. If you put it on your thumb drive, that way if you work on a different computer, you have access to it, or if you save it to the cloud and download it on a different computer or whatever, and you open up Maya, if you want to be able to access all those folders properly, you would go to File, Set Project. So you click on that, and you would find your folder. It's already set, but for the sake of this project, we'll go ahead and click Bouncing Ball, and you click Set. Now, whenever you set a project, it'll make sure that it's looking for all of your assets and save files in the way that Maya thinks that they should be organized. So if I were to hit File Save, it'll automatically save into that Scenes folder. If I go to File Import, File Reference, all that stuff, it'll look for stuff there. So we're going to go ahead and import our bouncing ball, and I want to talk about one important thing here. A lot of times you will likely just by default go, okay, I'm going to either import or open that character, so the ball, and what that will do is it'll literally take that entire Maya file and it'll import it straight into this unsaved, untitled Maya file. That can cause issues to an extent. What it can typically cause is bloated file sizes. So if I were to cancel and go back to my scenes here, and I were to right click on this, or I can even just see right here, this ultimate ball is 7.98 megabytes. If you're working in Maya and you just have like a ton of things imported, it can make your files just come to a halt by how many things are being loaded into at once. So there's a very nifty feature called referencing. So that's what we're going to do for all of our characters. And I'll explain it right here is you go to File, Create Reference, or Control R, but I'll just click on Create Reference. And I'll select my ultimate ball, and I'll say Reference. And it looks like Maya just imported the ball rig. And to an extent it kind of did, but basically what referencing is it's telling this scene, this Maya file, to look for this ball rig. If I were to delete that ball rig and then I opened up this scene, that ball rig would no longer be in the scene, as opposed to if you imported it, that ball rig would always and forever be in that scene. That might sound a little confusing, but you'll get used to it. Now, why would we want to reference it? Well, referencing it won't save the data of this rig inside your Maya file scene. And that can really help keeping your file sizes down. Now, for a small project like this, it's not that big of a deal, but when you've got like 3 characters and you've got like all sorts of props and set pieces, it can get really problematic. So I highly recommend referencing at the very least your characters, and usually even the props. Another very useful feature for referencing is, let's say I've got this rig here and I've referenced it and I want to edit the rig. Like, let's say, okay, you know what, I don't like the textures that are on this ball. You open up the ball rig, you edit the textures, and then you save it. When you reopen this Maya file scene, it'll update that referenced rig. If I were to import it and then I were to edit the original file and then come back to this file, the ball rig would not be updated. So that's referencing. Feel free to Google it if that's confusing. We'll do it in class and it should be just fine. So now that I've got this ball imported, I'm going to go ahead and save. So Control S, or if you're on Mac, it's Command S. And I'm going to name it bouncing ball underscore V01. That's version 1. I like to name my, or even V001. I like to name my files like this because oftentimes if you're about to make a large change in your animation, it's good to save as. That way if you completely mess up or if something goes wrong, you can always go back to a previous version. That way if I were to, say I'm animating a character and I'm making him or her walk in a circle, and I'm like, you know what, I want that character to also spin around while they're walking in circles or something crazy. I would go File, Save As, and create a version 2. That way if the spinning around causes problems and the rig breaks and everything goes crazy and Maya's on fire, you can just go back to version 01 and start from where you left off there, and things will be good. Another important thing to keep in mind is the file type for Maya. You have 2 options here, Maya ASCII and Maya binary. I highly recommend and will ask you all to save your files as ASCII. And the reason for that is it's a lot easier to edit the file. So if for some reason you download Maya 2016 and you save it as a Maya ASCII and you send it to me, but I've only got 2015, I can go in there and kind of tinker with the file in a notepad and force it to open up properly in 2015. Binary, that I can't do it that way, so just save it as a Maya ASCII for now. So we'll hit Save As. We've got our file now. So let's talk about this bouncing ball rig. This is called the Ultimate Bouncing Ball. If you were to Google it, you find the creator. I can't remember off the top of my head. They've got a series of Ultimate rigs that are very user-friendly and have all sorts of really cool options. If you were to look in our rigs file, you'll notice that there's a bloop ultimate ball, That's an option too. I think this one is a little better and more intuitive though. Plus there's a lot of cool options that I think you may enjoy. So this triangle here, this is kind of the master control. It's not animatable. You'll notice that these you can't set keys on these. That means you can't actually animate that. So this is where you would set it and forget it, like we talked about in class. So let's go ahead and select that. If you want to move the ball anywhere in specific, feel free, but for now I'm just going to leave it right in the center. The controls to really pay attention to would be the global scale. If you wanted the ball to be bigger, you would select that and middle mouse drag out here, and you can make it bigger or smaller, or you can type in a number. I'm just going to leave it at the default size, and for this project I recommend that you just leave it at 1 as well. The other controls, just ignore for now, like the extra controls, the visibilities, the smoothness. Those aren't really relevant. Now here's a little fun thing just for show. Ball type. Now basic is this, what we see right here. Simple is without the line. We've got a checker, a soccer ball, a different type of soccer ball, volleyball, basketball, tennis ball, golf ball, bowling ball, and finally a beach ball. So feel free to choose one that you like. We're going to be animating this as if it were a basketball, give or take, that kind of consistency to it. I'm just going to leave it as basic so I can see the line, but make it look however you'd like. The other controls here, once you set this and forget it, this yellow control in the center here is the main control. This is animatable. This is what you will animate to create the bouncing. It'll be your translate up, and if we do any rotations, that's where we'll use that. And that's it, just the translate and the rotate. The other two options are the squash and stretch. If you select the bottom one here, you can only translate it, but you can move it in all sorts of directions to squash and stretch it that way. The top thing does the exact same, but from the opposite direction. For this project, we will only be using the top control. There are certainly cases where you might use the bottom control, but for this bouncing ball, only the top. So we are going to animate this bouncing ball in a layered method, and what layering animation means is you'll animate the entire thing in one part of, so for instance like the translate up and down, we would animate the up and down, and once we're done doing the animating up and down, we'd animate the squash and stretch. Once we're animating the squash and stretch, then we'd animate the left to right. That's like going through the animation in passes, in waves. So that's how we're going to do the bouncing ball, because I think it's very intuitive for this, streamlined, and it'll help us avoid some of the nasty issues you get if you're animating too many things at the exact same time. Alright, so as I mentioned before, we're going to treat this as if it were kind of a basketball. So we're going to make sure you're on frame 1, and we're probably going to animate up to roughly 55 frames. So I'm going to select this down here in the time lane, type in 55 frames, just hit enter, and we're going to translate this up about, let's just type in 10. It'll be easy that way. Okay, 10. And if you'd like, remember you can hit spacebar. You can switch to a side view down here. If you don't like the way the grid looks, you can either click this button right here to turn on and off the grid, or you can go to Show, Uncheck Grid. For this, I will leave it on just so we can kind of see mathematically how things line up. So once we have our ball in place, we're going to hit S, which sets a key. Now remember to make sure that this button down here, the auto key, is highlighted in red. And one more time, we talked about this in class, but we'll also make sure our settings are correct. So if you click this white button next to it, under the time slider, make sure you're real-time 24 frames. Under the undo, you may want infinite. Up in animation, make sure it's weighted tangents. You can set it to auto for now, it's fine. And then for settings, just make sure it's on 24 frames per second. Hit save. Alright, so we've got our ball is keyframed on frame 1 up here. And right now all we're going to do is animate the up and down bouncing movement. So let's go ahead and move forward about, let's just say 7 or 8 frames. So I'm going to go to 7, frame 7, and we'll translate it down, and we'll make it 0, so I'll go over here and type 0, and that is the ball falling. Okay. Now it's going to bounce back up, and eventually you come to rest. So since basketballs typically lose roughly 40% of their energy, their momentum as they bounce. So for the timing, we'll just kind of wing the timing. For the spacing, we'll kind of follow a little bit slightly more mathematically. So it takes 7 frames to fall, and we're going to take 6 frames to go back up, and then 6 frames to go back down again. So there's a few quick keys that are nifty if you don't want to drag and be like, hey, what is 7 plus 6? You don't have to do that math, which can get crazy if you're like, oh, what's 50 plus 162, all that stuff. So on your keyboard, you'll see the comma and period keys, or the caret keys, right next to the M and the question mark. Those two buttons, if I highlight a control, if I push them, they will flip back and forth in between keyframes that are selected. So you see these red tick marks, those are keyframes that you set. If I click the comma, period, back and forth, it'll flip back and forth between those two. If you hold Alt, it might be options on the Mac, you'll have to check, but on a PC it is Alt. If you hold Alt and push the period or comma, it'll go forward every single frame. That's the equivalent of pushing, let's see, I think it's, yeah, these buttons over here. These buttons on the bottom right are the same thing, but it's much easier on your keyboard to just do that. So we'll go to frame 7. We're going to go forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to frame 13. And since basketballs lose roughly 40%, we'll bring this to 6. And if you have access to the Animator Survival Kit, I highly recommend flipping forward to one of the pages on bouncing balls and just kind of looking over it, using it as reference. One thing to keep in mind for physics is obviously whatever goes up must come down because of gravity, and also it'll take the same amount of time to go up as it will to come down because gravity is going to affect it at a constant acceleration, a constant force. The gravity doesn't change. So the ball's momentum is pushing up, gravity is pushing it down, which ultimately gravity will win. So if it takes 6 frames to go up, it'll take 6 frames to go down. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to frame 19, and we'll just type in 0 here to make it easy. Okay, and then we'll just kind of follow this process of taking less and less frames for each bounce. So we'll go 1. Oops. Make sure you select your key. If you have a thing selected over here and you start pushing your comma and period, you see how it's typing, so you can't move your time slider. You just kind of got to click away and reselect the control. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to frame 24, and we'll type in like 3.5. That's roughly 60% of 6, give or take. And then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again to 29. Type in 0. And then we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 to 33. And we'll do just 2. Whoops, not 23, 2. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 again to 37. Type in 0. What was that? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, and we'll do it. Translate y at 1. 1, 2, 3 to 43. Type in 0. And by having your auto key on here, you don't have to hit S every time. We'll do 1, 2 to 45. Type in like 0.5. 1, 2 to 47. Type in 0. Then we'll do 1 to 48. Type in like 0.2, 49, 0, and since a basketball will do a whole bunch of really tiny little bounces, we'll go ahead and add a few extra little bounces here. So at 50, do like 0.1 maybe, and then 51, 0, and then we'll do one more set here. At 52, we'll do like 0.025 or something, and then 53, finally 0, and it comes to a rest. Now if I hit play, you'll notice that it looks really weird. That's not, that's not convincing. There's no weight, there's no acceleration. Well, there is acceleration, it's just in the wrong spots. The ball is speeding up and then slowing down before it hits the ground, but because of gravity, it will never slow down. I mean, there is terminal velocity, so it will reach a point where it doesn't speed up anymore, but it won't ever slow down until it hits something. So now we're going to jump into the graph editor to fix this. So go ahead and select your primary control here until you see your ticks down at the bottom. We're going to go to Window, Animation Editors, Graph Editor, and you click it and you'll see this. You can move it, scale it around in case you want to see stuff along the side here. Now to navigate throughout your graph editor is going to be the same as if you're navigating out in your viewport. Holding down Alt will allow you to navigate when you left click drag or right click zoom in. Sorry, was it left click? No, sorry, middle mouse drag. I'm using a Wacom pen, so it's a little different. So holding Alt, middle mouse will allow you to drag. Right mouse or the mouse wheel will allow you to zoom in, or you can select something and hit F to frame it, which is what we're going to do. You notice here on your left you've got a list of attributes. Since we're only worried about the bouncing in the Translate Y, we'll select Translate Y so we don't see anything else. All the other ones don't really have keyframes on them because we didn't hit S on every single thing, but we'll click Translate Y anyway. Make sure you highlight them all, hit either A or F to frame. A means frame all, F just means frame selection. And this works a lot like kind of just your if you took any math classes where you talk about statistics and whatnot and time versus unit of measurements. So along the bottom here, from left to right in this direction, is your time. So you see down here frames 1 through 55 or whatever. This red thing is like your timeline, so it's moving forward. If I were to minimize this and do this, see how it's moving like that? So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually holding the letter K on the keyboard, and that'll allow you to scrub through the timeline as opposed to doing it down here. K by going like this. So that's from left to right is time. Up and down is your unit of measurement. So what this shows us, the Translate Y, is the up and down movement between frames 1 and 53. So that's why we see what we see. So that means that at frame 1 it's up, at frame 7 it's down, and then it's up, and then it's down, and all this stuff Maya fills up in between. Now by default, if you had your settings to auto, that's why it would look like this. Sometimes the settings might be to linear or flat or spline. That's why I recommend auto, because it's just a nice clean thing. So we got a lot of buttons up here, and we'll be using a lot of them, and I'll talk about them kind of all at the same time. So these little dots, first of all, are your keyframes, and then the lines in between is what Maya interpolates, mathematically guesses or creates, not guesses because it's accurate, the frames in between your keyframes. These little handles up here, they're called tangents. What these tangents do is they allow you to adjust the curves. Now, in animator terms, we tend to call these splines. I don't really know where that comes from, but that's what they're called. You can just call them curves if you want. So if you select one key and you see the tangents here, you can select either of these handles, and if you middle mouse drag, you can adjust it. Now by default this should be set to auto, and they're set to non-weighted, which I thought we set our settings to weighted, but for some reason it didn't. That's Maya for you. So I'm just going to undo and set that to normal. We can change the tangents with these buttons up here. So by default we've got AutoTangent, which is right here. Then there is SplineTangents, and SplineTangents they do their best to make the curves as smooth as possible. What that means oftentimes is the curves will overshoot. See how they're kind of curved down here and angled and weird? That can be useful, but sometimes that also means you have less control over the specific keyframe. Then we've got clamped tangents, I believe, or is that? Yeah, clamped tangents, which you will possibly be using if you were to work in blocking. Then we've got our linear tangents, which just means an exact straight, no slow down, no speed up from 1 to 10. Then we've got our flat tangents, which will always make these bars flat. We've got our stepped, which means that we won't even see the movement in between. We'll just see the keyframes. And then we've got plateau, which you won't really ever use. So we're just going to leave it on auto for now. However, as a ball hits the ground, it's not going to slow down, right? So we're going to click and drag and select all these bottom frames. If you need to, make sure you're zoomed in, whatever, you can do that. But we're going to select all these down here. And if you accidentally select any of these top ones, just zoom in and control click and drag over them so it'll unselect, or you can shift select to select something. So once we have all those selected, we're going to do a few different things. First of all, we're going to hit linear tangents. That way by default it'll start to look more like a proper bouncing ball. Then we're going to break the tangents. So that's these buttons over here. There's break, join, weighted, and non-weighted. So breaking, before I break it, if you select one of these handles and you try to move it around, you see how it moves both of them. That can cause issues. So we're going to make sure these are all selected still, and we're going to click this button right here, break tangents, and that'll allow me to move each side individually. We are also going to click weighted tangents right here, and that'll allow me to move them up and down. So to make this easy, we won't really mess with the top curves too much, I think. We'll probably just focus on these bottom curves here. So we're gonna go one section at a time, and we'll adjust these. So if you select the first 0 point and hit F, you can zoom in and kind of move this and just kind of move it up like this. So that's going to give the ball hang time, and then it's going to speed up and hit the ground. Just kind of eyeball it for now. Then go to the next section here. You can select and hit F. Now, you do want to keep both sides as equal as possible. So it's going to take a little tinkering, so you might move this up to here and maybe put your finger on the screen so you go, okay, that's where it was, and then you go over here and select it, and you try and kind of match it up roughly what the other one was as best as you can. Move on to the next one, hit F if you need to zoom in frame. Do the same thing here, just kind of, we're going to give these nice round peaks. Let's go one by one. And the reason we're doing this is because we want the ball to accelerate properly, which gives us a sense of slow in and slow out. Otherwise the ball's going to slow down before it hits the ground, and that just doesn't make sense. It is possible to overdo this, so sometimes you kind of just have to jump back and forth and see what looks good and what doesn't look good. You can get super technically mathematical about it. That's totally up to your personality. I usually just kind of eyeball it, unless it's a really important shot, and then maybe I kind of draw out the path that I want it to take and then follow that. So I'm almost done here. Moving on to the last final, and these technically I think they don't matter because there's no in-betweens because it goes from frame 49 to 50. So technically adjusting these doesn't do anything, so I won't worry about them anymore. And I'm going to move it aside off screen here, and we're going to go ahead and just hit make sure you go back to frame 1, hit play over here, and just kind of watch it. And you go, okay, that ball has some weight to it. Now I'm going to talk to you about Playblasts. So Playblast is essentially rendering out your video without worrying about lighting and shading and high quality and all that stuff. It's just kind of a quick way to see the animation. So to Playblast, you're going to right-click hold in the timeline here, just anywhere you want, and then you're going to click this options box. Left-click that. And we need to make sure that our settings are correct here. So by default, there's going to be a whole lot of different settings. You can turn off certain options here. I just leave that as default. The format, I typically set it to QuickTime. QuickTime is a nice video program that we can watch animation frame by frame. If you save it as an AVI, then it might open in a different program and whatever. An image we won't worry about. Encoding, I think by default it's PNG. You can change that to H.264 if you want. I'm just going to leave it at PNG because it's just what it is, and it works. And Playblasts don't need to be that big of a deal. Quality will bump up to 100. Display size you can do from render settings, and we'll get to that in a minute. Scale, I think by default it's like 0.25. Put that up to 1. Frame padding, you can just leave at 4. Now here's a couple different options here. Remove temporary files means that once you Playblast it and close the video, it will delete that video. If you have saved file checkmarked, then it'll save the video and you'll need to browse, but by default, like I said, it'll put it in the movies. For now, I'm going to turn off save to file because I don't want to save it every single time I watch it. The reason I'm Playblasting is because Maya doesn't play animation in real time perfectly, especially once you have a lot of complex things. Playblasts will allow you to analyze your animation, so it's always good to kind of just pause, Playblast, watch it, and then go back. So once you have these options set, just like I do, go ahead and hit Playblast. Let the program do its work. QuickTime should pop up any second here, and here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and go to View Loop or Command L or Control L, and I'll just hit play. I'll just kind of watch it a few times. I'm like, okay. In general, very satisfied with that. Now you notice it's not super pretty, not high quality, all that stuff, and you've also got the controls that you can see. We'll talk about that later, but for now we just kind of see it moving. So I'm satisfied. I'll close it. Now we're going to add our squash and stretch. And this is kind of what I was talking about with the layered approach. So we've already done our bouncing. That works. We're going to work on the squash and stretch now. So, as we're going to go back to frame 1, and we're only going to use this top squash and stretch control. So we'll go ahead and hit S to set a keyframe and kind of set the whole thing up. And as a ball falls, in general, it's going to stretch out like this. It's going to stretch out, and that's really extreme. And then obviously once it hits the ground, it's going to squash. Now for this project, we won't do that much stretching because that's crazy. So maybe we'll just do like 0.5 or something. You can kind of just type in a number that looks right to you. You can just kind of up and down right here. Don't worry about the left and right. For now, just do the up and down. I'm just going to do like 0.5. Then I'll go to the squash, and I will do negative 0.5 because we want that energy to be transferred kind of the same way. And then as the ball jumps up, it will stretch out again, but it has lost some energy, so it won't quite be 0.5 again. Maybe like 0.3 or something, whatever. And then we'll go to the peak, which is at frame 13, and we'll make sure to zero that out, because as the ball reaches the peak of an arc and the force of gravity and the force of the ball bouncing up are kind of equal, and the ball's not moving at all for that one frame, there's not going to be squash and stretch. So once again, keep going to the frame right before it hits. We'll stretch it out. Maybe I'll do like 0.2 this time or something, 0.2, and then squash, I'll do negative 0.2, and then the stretch up, I'll do maybe like 0.1 because it's lost some momentum. The peak at frame 24, make sure you zero it out. Then right before it hits at 28, I'll do like 0.05, or what was the last one I did? 0.2. Okay, so I'll do 0.1 at 28. I'll do 0.1, and then at 29 I'll do negative 0.1, and then the stretch up I'll do like 0.75 or something. Oops, 0.075 rather. And then at the peak, frame 33, 0. And then right before it hits again, I'll do like 0.05, and then it squashes at negative 0.05, stretches back up at like 0.02 maybe, and then the peak at frame 40 will zero out, and then we won't add any more squash and stretch because there's not enough force. So let's go ahead and Playblast that again. So if you kept all the settings exactly the same, you won't have to push the option box. You just hit Playblast, let the program do its work, and we'll go ahead and watch this. Alright. So in general, that looks kind of nice. It's not 100%. Sometimes animators like to make sure that the extreme stretch out right here is actually touching the ground. The reason I don't have that is because I made my arcs nice and super round with lots of hang time. So if you tone that down a little bit, then this ball will come down at that frame. I'm not going to worry about it because we can see what's going on. Alright, so the next thing we're going to add is the left and right movement, because we don't want this ball to just bounce up and down. That's boring. We want it to bounce from left to right and come to a stop. So we'll animate the first of all, if you want, you can take this primary control and move it all the way over here. Maybe put it at 20 or something. Oops. And then we'll make sure you're on frame 1. This should have already had a keyframe set on it. Go to the very end, frame 55, and we're going to move this over to like here, whatever. We'll just eyeball it. So if you hit play, you'll notice it's going to come to a stop. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that the ball is speeding up and then slowing down. Now, once again, for physics reasons, that doesn't make sense. There's no reason that it should be picking up speed unless there's like a fan blowing on it or whatever. So technically this ball wants to move from left to right at a constant speed unless acted upon by another force, in which case is the friction of the ground. So we are going to once again make sure you select your main control, open up your graph editor, and if you follow my directions exactly, you should be able to go to Translate Z and hit F and see the curve. If that doesn't work, then go to Translate X and you might see it. For me it's Translate Z, and so you watch this curve. So the curve, what this means is over time it's not moving very fast, and then it's picking up speed, and then it's slowing down again. So for this first key, we want to set the tangent to like whatever this is, the linear linear because it's going to kind of start off at a constant speed, but it will slow down. So we'll kind of just we'll just set that at linear and leave this one at auto or flat. And we'll move that aside for now and just kind of watch this play out. And I think that looks pretty nice. Yeah, in general that works for this project. You can always go in there and really kind of get nitpicky and stuff. So let's go ahead and Playblast that to watch it in real time. And I'll just watch it like twice. See, okay, in general, that looks pretty good. It does look a little fast, so in order to make it look less fast, you might not move it as far. So maybe in the beginning, maybe it only moves not as far. If it doesn't move as far, so maybe you've got your primary control set to like 15, and then the ball moves from 0 to like -30 here. So now it will go a little slower. Yeah, it's a little better. So we're almost done here. Hopefully you can figure out what we're missing. So if you watch this, you should be going, there's something not quite right here. There's a couple things, but there's one major thing that's not quite right, and that's the squash and stretch. So the up and down squash and stretch is right, but there should be some left and right movement. So we can take our control here, and first of all make sure that you go to your frame 1 and hit S so that all these are zeroed out. And if you go to the frame right before it hits the ground, you should be able to move it to the side here. And it's going to kind of angle like that, and then make sure it's zeroed out right there. And on the jump up, you'll angle it over again. Up here, you're going to zero it out. And it gets a little tedious, but you kind of just get the hang of it. Zero it out, angle it, zero it out, and angle it, etc., etc. And you'll lessen the amount that it is angled by each time. And I'm not going to really get too mathematical on this. I'm just going to eyeball it the whole way through. And the reason you lessen it is because it's losing momentum. You could technically make the ball spin throughout the air and stuff. It's a little more complex. So we'll just leave it at that. So in general, it's kind of exaggerated, which is fine. That's what animation is all about. But that looks much, much better. The final thing you may have noticed is the ball comes to a stop, but it keeps rolling, right? So actually, I'm going to go here and add another extra 5 frames. I'm going to select this. Here's a nifty trick. So you'll notice that I added an extra 5 frames, and that's because I wanted to slide a little bit longer. If you go to the timeline and you select a keyframe like this, you see so the gray is like a selection. So on frame 55, if you middle mouse that, you can click and drag it, and that will copy it, and then you can hit S, and that will paste it. And then what you would do is you go back to 55, you would right click and hit delete, and that would move it. But that's one way, probably not the best way, so I shouldn't have done that first, but go ahead and undo a couple times. Here's the other way. So you go to frame 55, hold shift, left click, and you'll see that it's highlighted in red. Now be very careful, there's a lot of different options down here and it's hard to see, so you might have to undo a few times, but these inner yellow, whoops, that might happen too. These inner yellow arrows, those allow you to move your keyframe. So I'm going to move that to frame 60 here. And that means that my ball is going to slide for an extra 5 frames. That just allows it a little bit longer to kind of slow down. And I might also move the ball over a little bit, maybe to here. Okay. So as the ball is sliding, it should kind of rotate a little bit, right? So what we can do is we can go to frame 53, right? This is the last moment that it stops bouncing. From 53 all the way to 60, it's just rolling. We can hit S to make sure that everything is locked down. Then we can go to 60 and we can hit E to rotate, and we can just kind of rotate the ball a little bit. And you kind of have to eyeball it. And then obviously you got to go into the graph editor, and that'll be your rotate X. And you're going to want that to, if you zoom in, select this last key and hit F, you're going to want that to start off linear and then slow down, just like this. Maybe select that, break the tangents, and then move it even more so it slows down even quicker. I'll move that. I'll leave that right there in case you want to look. It's the rotate X. And then I'll just kind of row through here and see how that looks. So it looks like it rotates a little too much, so I'm going to rotate it back. That looks okay. So I'll just play it in Maya a couple times. Yeah, it looks a little funky. It probably would look better if I kept it rolling, but you get the idea. So now you're on the path to figuring out how to let the ball kind of settle. So now we're going to set this up for presentation purposes. So if we were to turn in this project, you're like, okay, there's lines in the background, we see the controls, the ball's just technically bouncing on thin air, and that's not very appealing. So we're going to create a ground for the ball to bounce on, and then we'll turn off all these little lines, and then it'll Playblast it, save it, and turn it in. So obviously, if you haven't already, make sure to save. I probably should have mentioned that, every 10 minutes, always hit save, because if your program crashes, you want to make sure you can get to where you left off. So I'm going to go to Create, Polygon Primitives. Once again, I recommend turning off interactive creation, but it's personal. I don't like it. If you like it, then keep it on. And we'll go ahead and we'll click on Cube. And we got a cube down here, right? So what we can do is we can move this around. So if we move it down, you know what, there's a better way to do this actually. So select your cube and make sure you got your channel box open. Hit Control A until it says channel box, the thing that you've been using to animate the whole time. Go down and you'll see this Inputs menu, Polycube 1. If you click that, it gives you some kind of default options. So you can control how you want it to look and such. So we're going to create the height to be, actually, we'll do like, just do like 10. Then depth, we'll do like, 50 or something. And since we made it 10 high, we can translate it 5 down. So we go to translate, type in -5. Now that's the ground. So the ball will hit that ground. Here's another quick trick that we'll go over more in depth later, but for now, for this project, just real quick, if you select your object here, and first of all, I always recommend naming things, so I'm gonna select the object, go up here to the channel box, click P-Cube1, and type in ground. Once you have your ground selected, go down here into the Layers tool bar. You see Display, Render, Anim. Click Display, Layers, Create Layer from Selected, and that will put this on a layer. And what that'll allow you to do is you can make it visible or invisible. And if you click this box, you can turn it into unselectable. If that says R there, you cannot select this. So now if you want to animate this, you won't accidentally click this and move it around. Highly recommended. So now we've got a ground. We don't need these grids anymore, so we're going to go ahead and show, uncheck grid, or you can click this button right up there. We're also going to go show and uncheck NURBS curves. Now the curves are the controls. I've got a nifty little toolbar that sadly you don't have access to, but you can make a quick key. I don't know how off the top of my head, but just show NURBS curves, turn it off. So there we go. It's going to look kind of nice. So Next step is we're going to want to frame the scene and make sure that we don't have it's not zoomed out too much, it's not zoomed in too much, it's just right. So go to your frame 1, and we're going to go to right over here in your options thing. Now if that's gone, which can happen, then I think you need to go into window. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I'll look into it, and if anybody, for some reason, if this isn't there, let me know and I'll come help you fix it. But you go to View, Camera Settings, and you want to click Resolution Gate. What Resolution Gate does is it shows you what your camera sees. Alright? Next we'll change our render settings. So up here in the toolbars you should see these little clappers. The far right clapper with the 2 circles next to it is your render settings. If you click it, you'll get this render setting thing. Now for the sake of this project, we're not going to render it out fancy, so we're not going to mess any settings, we're just going to change the resolution. So we're going to do presets, and we'll do HD 720. That way we can watch our video in nice HD, even though we're not rendering in HD, but that's fine. It's just kind of a bigger screen size, easier to see. That's the only setting we're going to change for now. We'll get into more of these settings another day. So you hit close, and you see right here 1280 by 720. Now take note where your ball starts and where your ball ends. Now I have a screen marker tool that allows me to draw on the screen. So I am going to just, for my sake, I'm going to just draw that, kind of see where the ball is. Should have done this. Okay. That way I know how to frame it. And then I'll actually that doesn't really help me. I feel silly. Okay, since the screen marker doesn't actually move. So just trial and error. Zoom in to make sure that it kind of is always in the shot at all times. Maybe we zoom in like this. Just, give it some room. Once you have the camera set up the way you like it, we'll go ahead and turn off the camera resolution gate. So go ahead and go to View, Camera Settings, and click No Gate, because if you Playblast, it'll see that, and then it looks weird. So right now you might think, you're depending on how your screen is set up, you might go, oh, I can't see what's going on here. That's fine, it'll Playblast just fine. We're not going to worry about colors or textures, we're just going to turn it in like this. So we'll go ahead and go to right-click over the timeline here, Playblast, and click the options box. This time we're going to save to file, okay? And we're going to call this bouncing ball, and we'll go ahead and hit Playblast. And since we set our project folders, it's going to automatically save that in the correct folders. So it'll also open up QuickTime in just a moment here, and you can watch it and be amazed at the work you've done. Bouncing ball. So I'm going to close QuickTime here. I'm going to save Maya. I'm going to close Maya because I don't need it anymore. You can minimize it if you're going to keep working on stuff, whatever you need. And for some reason Maya takes like 5 minutes to close. Okay, there we go. So on my desktop, I've got my slider Brandon folder. I'm going to find my bouncing ball folder, and if you navigate to your movies, it'll be bouncing ball. So you will turn in this entire folder onto the CMCO coursework under it'll be CMCO 460 in-class assignments, and then there'll be a bouncing ball folder. So you'll just click and drag that on there, and then when I navigate to this, I'll just say okay, I go to the movies and I'll watch it. That way you don't have to worry about where you put the video folder. And then I'll just open it up and I'll watch them. And everybody's in general should look like this. If you wanted to move yours from right to left, if you wanted to spend more time, because we didn't even really track the arcs, like This probably could have been a lot more rounded arcs by changing the spacing from left to right. There's all sorts of things that you could have done and whatnot. You could have had the ball hit a wall and then bounce back. So that's it for the bouncing ball project. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck on the rest of your work.